What is the cost of a secret when the man you hide it from owns the law? Sometimes the only safe place left is the one roof willing to risk everything. Before we start the story, I felt happy for sharing stories with your honors. Thanks for subscribing. The tempest swept in fast, completely drowning the last flicker of evening sun. The sky turned the grim color of old bruised fruit. Caleb had just finished securing the back pasture gate when his eyes caught her. A solitary figure stumbling down the muddy lane. Her travel cloak was drenched, her hair matted to her face. She was desperately clutching something beneath her worn shawl. He'd seen plenty of travelers over the years, but the sheer panic in the way she moved, half staggering, half fleeing, made him drop his tools. He hurried toward the fence line. She nearly collapsed as she reached him, breath tearing from her in sharp, ragged gasps. "Please," she managed, voice barely a thread. "I need shelter, just until the morning." Caleb didn't hesitate. He nodded, already reaching out to steady her. "This way. Let's get you inside, fast. That sky is about to tear wide open." Guided her to the lean-to porch. The first heavy raindrops splattered on the wooden planks as he opened the door. Inside, the woman stood near the hearth, shivering hard. Her eyes quickly scanned every flicker of shadow. Caleb fetched a thick wool blanket and draped it over her shoulders. He then poured a cup of hot herbal tea, setting it carefully on the crate between them. "The name's Caleb," he said, his tone low. "You are completely safe here. There's nothing to fear." She nodded, but her hand shook so much she had to grip the mug with both. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost lost beneath the booming thunder. A long silence followed. The storm lashed against the cabin windows. The wind sounded like a mournful cry. Caleb moved around, tending to small tasks, giving her space. But he couldn't stop wondering what force had pushed her into this desolate night. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was so quiet, he had to strain to hear it. "My name is Eleanor." She paused, then looked up. Her eyes were swollen and haunted. "I am sorry for the imposition. I truly had nowhere else left to turn." Caleb shook his head. "No imposition at all. People help each other here. It's the only way to endure." But Eleanor just pulled the blanket tighter, as if bracing against something worse than the cold. The hours crawled by. Caleb made a modest supper, stewed beans and dense bread. He set a plate before her. She picked at the meal, eating hardly anything. Her attention was locked on the slow-burning fire. At last, when the high wind had died and the rain had settled to a simple drumming sound, she spoke again. "Have you ever kept a weighty secret, Caleb?" Her tone was odd, hollow. Caleb considered this. "I imagine everyone carries a secret or two. Some are much heavier than others." Eleanor nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. But what if keeping it meant that someone else might be harmed? She looked up then, truly looking at him. Caleb saw the raw terror in her eyes, not just for herself, but for someone she was protecting. He placed his mug down, leaning forward slightly. "You can tell me, Eleanor. Whatever it is, I promise to listen." She hesitated, glancing nervously at the bolted door, then back at Caleb. "Don't tell anyone," she whispered, voice cracking. "Promise me, please." Caleb nodded, his voice low and firm. "You have my absolute word." Eleanor took a shallow breath, her hands twisting the fabric in her lap. "There's a man in town, a Mr. Thorne. Everyone thinks he's a decent pillar of the community, a religious man. But he is not. He has committed things, truly dreadful things to me and to other women. I tried to go to the deputy once, but Thorne has too much influence. They dismissed me, said I was just a girl causing trouble." Her voice broke, and deep shame stained her cheeks. A cold, heavy anger settled in Caleb's chest. He knew the type. Men who hid behind wealth and public standing. Men who inflicted pain and simply walked away. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. Telling the truth requires immense guts." She shook her head, tears running down her face. It changed nothing. "No one believed me. And now he knows I tried to speak out. He said if I ever breathed the word again, he would ensure I simply vanished for good." Caleb reached across the table, placing a comforting hand over hers. "You are safe here. I will not let anything happen to you." But internally, he felt the burden of her secrets settle onto his own shoulders. It was heavier than any load he had ever carried. The storm receded, but the strain inside the small ranch house intensified. Caleb sat awake long after Eleanor had finally drifted off on the worn sofa. Her breathing was shallow and uneasy. He stared into the cooling embers, going over her words again and again. The name Thorne echoed in his mind. It brought back fleeting memories of the man's arrogant smirk at town gatherings, the way he seemed to control every local decision. Caleb had always disliked him, but he never conceived of the true darkness hidden beneath that polished surface. He double-checked the window latches before settling back into his chair. His old hunting rifle was propped securely within easy reach. Outside, the rain was barely a whisper. The wide prairie seemed to be holding its breath. Caleb's mind churned with questions. How many others had Thorne hurt? How many had attempted to speak, only to be silenced by money or fear? He thought of Eleanor's shaking hands and her wounded eyes. A protective instinct surged through him, one he hadn't felt in many years. Dawn arrived, slow and muted gray. Caleb brewed coffee and set a mug next to Eleanor, who woke with a sudden, frightened start. For a second, she looked ready to bolt, but then she registered Caleb's calm face and eased back down slightly. "Did you get any rest?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not much. I keep imagining he's going to find me." Caleb nodded, understanding her fear completely. "You are safe here, I promise you that." Eleanor sipped the coffee, still trembling slightly. "I just don't know what to do, Caleb. If I return, he'll ruin me. If I keep running, he'll just track me down. He always does." Her voice sounded utterly defeated. Caleb leaned forward, his voice measured and firm. "You don't have to decide everything right now. You can stay as long as you need. We will figure this out, together." The day passed in an uneasy quiet. Caleb tended to his chores, constantly watching the road. He half expected to see a strange horseman or worse, Mr. Thorne himself. Eleanor helped him where she could, feeding the hens, sweeping the front porch. But her mind was clearly miles away. Any unexpected sound, a shadow moving, a branch breaking, made her jump. Her eyes would dart immediately toward the door. By late afternoon, Caleb knew he could not shoulder this secret alone. Not if it meant letting a man like Thorne continue his abuse, but he was also aware of the extreme risk. Thorne's influence was widespread, and the town was always quick to mistrust outsiders. He needed concrete evidence, something no one could possibly dismiss. They needed a solid plan. That evening, as the sun went down and streaked the sky in brilliant hues of orange and lilac, Eleanor sat on the porch, knees drawn up to her chest. Caleb sat beside her. The silence between them was now comforting. "Do you ever think about just leaving?" she asked out of the blue. "Just riding away and never once looking back?" Caleb managed a sad, distant smile. "I did once, but this property, this land, it's deep in my soul. And sometimes, running away just means you're letting the bad men win." Eleanor nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "I wish I possessed your courage." Caleb gently shook his head. "You are more courageous than you realize. Speaking the truth when no one will listen, that takes more grit than most folks ever possess." She looked at him, hope faintly glowing in her eyes for the first time. "Do you honestly think anyone would listen if we tried again?" Caleb squeezed her hand firmly. "If we do it together, maybe they finally will." A sudden loud noise shattered the moment. A horse's hooves galloping hard and fast up the lane. Caleb shot to his feet, his heart pounding, and instinctively reached for his rifle. Eleanor shrank back, pure fear etched on her face. The rider pulled up sharply, dust swirling. Caleb instantly recognized the deputy's badge glinting in the twilight. Deputy Hayes swung down, his expression grim. "Evening, Caleb. I heard you took in a visitor last night. Do you mind if I step inside?" Caleb nodded slowly, stepping aside. Eleanor's eyes widened, but she remained silent, clutching her blanket close. The deputy's gaze lingered on her, then shifted to Caleb. "We need to discuss Thorne." "We need to discuss Thorne." Inside, the deputy removed his hat and set it on the table. His eyes were focused entirely on Eleanor. "Word gets around quickly in a small town," he said quietly. "Thorne has been asking questions, looking specifically for you." Eleanor's hands tightened around the blanket until her knuckles were white. Caleb positioned himself between her and the lawman, his stance clearly protective. "She is under my roof, Hayes. No one is going to touch her." The deputy nodded slowly, his face lined with genuine concern. "I'm not here to arrest her, Caleb. I'm here because I believe her." Eleanor's breath hitched. For a moment, she was incapable of speech. You actually believe me?" "I've witnessed far too much in this job to dismiss a woman's terror. And you are not the first person to come to me about Thorne. But every previous account has been buried. People are too scared, or they're paid off, or they simply vanish." Caleb's jaw tightened. "So, what are our next steps?" The deputy looked at Eleanor, his eyes gentle yet serious. "We need irrefutable proof. Something that simply cannot be denied. Thorne is extremely cautious, but men like him always make a mistake. If you are ready, Eleanor, I will personally help you, but it will be challenging. He has connections in high places." Eleanor hesitated, looking to Caleb for strength. He nodded, steady and silent. "I will stand with you," he said. "Whatever this takes." She drew a shaky, resolute breath, then nodded her head. "I will do it. I am completely finished with running." The plan was assembled carefully, slowly. Each stage was weighed down by risk. Eleanor wrote down every detail she could remember, dates, names, locations. The deputy would begin collecting whatever quiet evidence he could find so as not to alert Thorne. Caleb would keep constant watch, ensuring Eleanor was never alone for a moment. The days passed in a blur of mounting tension. Every sound, every knock at the door, every shadow in the yard set their nerves on edge. One evening, as the sun finally slipped behind the distant hills, Eleanor found Caleb in the barn repairing a broken gate. She stood in the wide doorway, her silhouette briefly outlined by the last light of the day. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me, for not simply sending me away." Caleb set down his hammer, wiping his hands on his worn jeans. "You don't need to thank me. No person should ever have to face something like this alone." "Huh." She moved closer, her voice thick with emotion. "I was so terrified, Caleb. I truly believed that speaking up would only make everything worse. But you listened. You never judged." Caleb looked at her, his eyes warm and sincere. Sometimes all a person truly needs is someone to hear them, someone to stand beside them when the world decides to turn its back. A sudden commotion outside shattered the fragile quiet. A horse galloping fiercely, voices raised in genuine anger. Caleb and Eleanor rushed out to the porch, their hearts slamming in their chests. In the fading light, they saw Thorne himself, flanked by two rough-looking men riding up fast. He dismounted, swaggering toward the house, his eyes cold and menacing. "Evening, Caleb. I hear you've been harboring a fugitive." "That's a highly dangerous game to play." Caleb stepped forward, firmly blocking the doorway. "She's not running, she is making a stand, and you are not welcome here." Thorne sneered, glancing dismissively at Eleanor. "You think anyone will believe her word over mine? I practically own half of this county." Deputy Hayes appeared then, stepping silently out of the deepest porch shadow. His badge flashed in the twilight. "Not anymore, Thorne. We have your recorded words, your threats, and more than one independent witness. This is over." For the first time, Mr. Thorne's absolute confidence completely vanished. He looked from the deputy to Caleb, then to Eleanor. She stood tall, her fear replaced by a fierce, quiet defiance. "You can't do this!" Thorne spat the words out. The deputy's voice was utterly calm and final. "You are finished, Thorne. The truth always finds its way out." As the lawman led Thorne away, Eleanor sagged heavily against the porch railing. Tears streamed down her face. Not tears of fear, but of overwhelming relief. Caleb put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's finally over," he said softly. "You are free." She looked up at him, hope shining clearly in her eyes. "Thank you, Caleb, for listening, for trusting me, for standing with me when no one else dared to." And as the stars began to blink awake over the wide prairie, Caleb knew that sometimes the most courageous act a person can commit is simply to listen and to stand beside someone when the world desperately tries to silence their truth.